Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the conversation. I'm your host, Roxanne Grace. Guys, today we are talking to Dr. Caroline Leaf. You don't want to miss it. So sit back, relax, and get ready for this conversation. Dr. Caroline Leaf is a communication pathologist and cognitive neuroscientist with a master's and PhD in communication pathology, specializing in cognitive and metacognitive neuropsychology. She's a best-selling author, international speaker, worldwide educator, and the owner of NeuroCycle, the first ever brain detox app that will help eliminate stress, anxiety, depression, and toxic thinking. Today, we're going to discuss how to change behavioral and thought patterns. We're going to discuss the difference between our minds and our brains. And Dr. Leaf is going to share with us how arguing the right way could actually benefit our health and our relationships. Let's bring in the lady herself, none other than Dr. Caroline Leaf. Dr. Caroline Leaf, what an honor and a privilege to have you today on this episode of The Conversation. How are you doing?
Thank you. It's so great to be with you, Roxanne. I'm looking forward to our talk.
So I usually begin by asking my guests a series of personality questions. And so are you ready for these questions?
I'm ready.
All right. You look nervous.
Do I look nervous? I don't even know what's coming at me. I do so many interviews and I get asked so many interesting things. So
okay, so you don't have to think too hard about these questions. It's pretty easy.
Okay.
All right, here we go. So first question, what is your favorite color?
Oh, I love black and I love pink.
Get out of town. That is exactly my favorite combo. My favorite.
Okay, there you go. I wear so much black, I tell you, but then I'd love to spruce it up with a little bit of pink. You know, here's my inevitable companion, my pink coffee mug, pink nails.
I love it. I love it. That's exciting. We don't often have guests share that they love pink. I love pink, but I always say that I love pink when it's combined with black. I love that.
Yeah, that is good. Good
That's
taste.
Great answer. Yeah, good taste. Good taste. All right. What is your favorite food?
I love Italian food, and especially Italian. Yeah, because I'm half Italian, so anything
cool.
Italian.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. What is your favorite word? We're getting really deep now.
Oh, what? There's so many. My favorite word at the moment is mind management, the area that I work in, because it's just so critical to humans functioning like they should. So I'd say mind management is a really favorite word of mine. I use it a lot.
Well, I can't wait to dive in deeper into this conversation. So keep that thought. Okay. If you could time travel somewhere, where would you go and when?
I would probably go into the future. I'd like to see what happens with how we start changing how we manage things like our mind and our brain and science. I'd like to see where it goes and how our current environment, which is so competitive and sort of neoliberalism, how it's really affected people and how humanity is in a very bad state. I want to go into the future and see how that changes because it always goes in cycles.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, doctor, what makes you sad?
When I look at just seeing how people are intolerant of each other, the level of intolerance, the level of judgment, the level of people trying to make other people like themselves instead of accepting diversity and accepting that we're all so different and accepting that, you know, that it's normal to be sad and it's normal to be different and that kind of thing. That upsets me a lot. It makes me very sad, this sort of judgmental kind of attitude that a lot of people have.
Yeah, absolutely. What makes you happy?
Oh, my family. I can say that without a doubt. My family, and I mean, I know that's so cheesy, but they do, and our little puppies, and then just also my work. I absolutely love what I do. It's very, very satisfying to help people to understand the mind and the brain, and it's incredibly satisfying. And my research that I do clinical trials, very, very satisfying.
Oh, that's amazing. I think it's important to love what we do. And I find most of our guests actually say when they think about their happy thoughts, almost all of them say it's their family. Isn't that cool?
It is. Yeah, it's consistent. I mean, there's been so much research done on that. And it's like people's last thing and they're dying kind of thing. I wish they'd spend more time with their family or their family's the most important thing. So yeah, it is. It's a consistent human universal value, I believe.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay. So doctor, I know that you hear the voice of God often and in so many different ways. I know that you also are a student of the word. But if you could hear the audible voice of God right now, what question would you want him to answer?
I think that what we need is a bigger understanding of, well, let me explain this like this. I think we need to understand God differently. And we need to understand that God is, I always talk about Godness and loveness, because I think that the narrow definition we have of what we think God is a problem. And I would ask the question, how can we expand on helping people to broaden their minds to understand what love is? Because the world does not operate sufficiently on love, yet we're wired for love, and we're made in love, and we're made from love. So I look at God as love. And I'd like that, how do you get that through to people in a big way?
I'm sitting here in front of a whole bunch of questions, and I'm crazy excited to dive in. So let's get through as many as we can in the next 20, 25 minutes or so. Okay, so I've actually been a fan of yours for some time. My husband knows.
Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. I'm very, very interested and just so intrigued by all of your conversations.
Thank you.
But I was watching a video recently, and I heard you talk about how we have more control over our thoughts and our decisions and whatnot than we are told that we have.
Absolutely. It starts with understanding what a thought is, and a thought is the product of our mind. So in order to understand you need to understand what your mind is, and your mind is not your brain. Your mind is actually your sort of spiritual part of you, whereas your brain is and body are the physical part of you. So your mind is literally, you could see your mind as your aliveness. And with our mind, we are processing the events and experiences of life daily, from the time we open our eyes till the time we go to sleep. We are processing the events and circumstances of life through our mind, which is our ability to think and feel and choose and respond. And we then use that experience is then sort of like an energy force that we then use. It literally goes into the brain, and as the mind and the brain connect, as you have the psycho-neurobiological connection, there's a product, and that product is a thought made of proteins. So experiences are converted through the mind into the brain as a product, a physical structure. It looks like a tree. That's why I always use my little tree analogy. So for those of you that are listening, I'm holding up a little tree in a pot, but we literally convert every experience into thought trees. So thought is, it looks like a tree, and it's got roots and it's got branches. So the roots and branches are the memories. So thoughts are made of memories. So thoughts aren't the same thing as memories. Thoughts are made of memories, and memories are all the data and the emotions and the choices and all the stuff. The roots would be the original source that it comes from. So for example, this conversation is about mind, brain health or whatever. So that would be the name of the tree, the thought tree. Right. And then everything that I'm saying in our discussion is going into the root system. And then exactly the same time, every person listening and watching, their interpretation of what I'm saying is the branches. So you grow the roots, you grow the branches literally at the same time. And the branches are different for everyone because we're all unique. And this combination of the source and the interpretation, the thought tree with its memories and emotions, choices, etc., that is then will manifest in what we say and what we do. So it's kind of like out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks kind of thing. And that can be changed because our brain is constantly changing. That's called neuroplasticity. I did some of the first work in neuroplasticity in my field back in the late 80s when they didn't believe the brain could change. And I showed with people with traumatic brain injuries that when you stimulate the brain with the mind, and that you can actually change these trees. So you can change these thoughts. And these thoughts are behind our behaviors and our words. So if we can look at our behaviors and our words and all the signals, we can actually then track back to what we actually thinking, feeling, and choosing, and track back to the original source. And we can deconstruct that and reconstruct it. Now, this is a healthy one, so you want to grow that. You don't want to get rid of it. Right. But if it's a toxic thought, then I always use my toxic tree, which is this wiry tree. That would be a toxic issue, an abuse, a trauma, etc. Then that is causing damage to the brain and the body. And these are the thoughts that keep us stuck in all kinds of anguish and produce signals of depression and anxiety, etc. And these are the ones that we need to capture and completely renew. So the work that I've done is the process of understanding how these thoughts form, and then how to recognize them when they're toxic and affecting how we're functioning, and literally capturing those and deconstructing and reconstructing them, with the principle in mind that you can't change what's happened to you, but you can change what's in you. And that's mind management, and that's essentially bringing thoughts into captivity and renewing them.
Goodness.
I said a lot.
I love it. Honestly, that is such great news. I
It is.
think
It's very hopeful. It's very, very hopeful.
extremely hopeful. And on that note, I've also heard you talk about how we can change these behavioral patterns or whatnot in 63 days. Have you not shared something like that? Maybe tell us a bit
Yes.
about that, which is also really good news.
It is good news because what happens is that there's been a myth going around for a long time that habits form in 21 days.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of programs based and things on that. And you'll see in my program, the first 21 days are very important. But that those 21 days, and it's more or less 21, give or take a couple of days either side, but it takes around about that time for you to become aware of something, to capture the thought, become aware of it, deconstruct it, reconstruct it into something healthy. But then it's not a habit yet. It's still a very small, newly formed thought. So it needs to be strengthened to be sustainable. So for a behavior change to happen, that thought has to become so strong that it becomes a habit. And that takes an additional 42 days at least. So the 63 days is 9 weeks. So it actually takes 9 weeks to form a habit that creates a behavior change, not just 21. And most people will give up around day 3, day 4.
Totally.
And if they get further, and most people by day 3, day 4, they're kind of aware of what they should be changing and why they should be changing it, but they don't stick with the program. I mean, I'm talking in general. People just don't push through, and they give up, and they kind of get stuck on that hamster wheel.
Right.
And it does require work, and it's mind work. This is all your mind. Dead person can't do this. So when you're alive, you're doing this. You're managing your mind to change your brain. So everything I'm teaching in my latest book, Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess, is how to do this mind management, how to find that thought. And so if you do it for less than 63 days, you're not going to get the sustainable behavior change. And you're going to get the awareness, oh gosh, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. This is what I should be doing. This is how I should be functioning. This is how I want to function, but I'm not able to function there yet. So I cannot stress the importance of going the whole 63 days. And then just want to stress that nothing is just fixed in one 63-day cycle. You can have, depending on the complexity of the trauma, you may need multiple cycles. Like if I've had certain patients that, when I still practice, and I practiced for nearly 25 years, I had certain patients that had such severe trauma that we would work for sometimes up to 18 months to 2 years, multiple cycles of 63 days to find all the elements of the trauma. Because if it's very complex and very long-standing and has been suppressed for very long, which can happen with complex trauma like abuses, it's so hard to deal with that people tend to push them down into their psyche, and then because these are alive and living, and they're proteins that are alive, they're dynamic, they're like volcanoes, they will explode eventually. And those explosions, create tremendous mess physically and mentally in our lives. So that takes to get rid of something that's been there for so long does take long. So sometimes you'll get something under control in one cycle. Sometimes you need 2, sometimes 3, sometimes 10. But the whole point is each cycle is a progressive growth forward. And it's a disciplined working through getting your mind under control.
And awareness is crucial. Correct?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Roxanne, it's vital. Without awareness, you can't change anything. So what we see from neuroscience is that when you become aware, what you're essentially doing is, if you want to use scripture, you're bringing the thought into captivity. So we see from neuroscience, if something like you can't see this, I'm holding the tree under the table. Now I'm going to bring it into the conscious mindness. Awareness is that you're becoming conscious of it. You have a conscious mind and an unconscious mind and a subconscious mind. Your conscious mind is only working when you're awake. Your non-conscious mind works 24/7, and it's the most powerful dynamic part of you, where all your memories in these thought trees, your belief systems, etc., are stored. So right now, our conscious and our non-conscious mind is working. Your non-conscious mind never switches off. Your conscious mind switches off when you go to sleep. So what you want to do is, when you're consciously awake, you want to bring what's in the non-conscious mind into conscious awareness to change it. Otherwise, it's in the non-conscious mind driving how we are functioning, and it becomes the non-conscious driver. And that's when we say, I can't help it. I'm just doing these things. It's part of me. Yes, it is part of you, but it's not a part of your original design, because we see in neurobiology, psychoneurobiology, that we wired for love. We have an optimism bias. There are no structures in your brain or body to handle toxicity. So as soon as we have a toxic issue, our entire brain and body, the immune system of our brain, will do exactly what it would do with something like the COVID virus. It would send out T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes and macrophages to try and eliminate the COVID virus. Well, this is also a protein structure. These thoughts have been converted by your mind into your brain with genetic reactions, and you build these are protein structures. They are physical protein structures, and your immune system sees these as causing damage. This is threatening your survival. This works against your wired for love mode. So then your mind, brain, and body has been designed to send you signals to tell you, hey, you got to deal with this stuff. And those signals come in the form of emotions like depression and anxiety. Those are not illnesses. They're warning signals. They're calling you to be a detective, to do the work of capturing the thought and renewing it. And behavioral signals like withdrawing, or broken relationships, or whatever you're doing behavioral wise, what are you saying and doing? Also in terms of your perspective of life, how are you looking at life? That's another warning signal. And then what's going on in your body, that's another warning signal, because these things cause a reaction in our brain and in our body, because these thoughts are built into our brain as trees and into our DNA and into the gravitational fields of our mind. So when we experience something toxic, we feel it in our body and in our brain and in our mind. So we have to address all three. So our body will also send signals of like pain in your gut, or heart palpitations, or some kind of physical symptom, GI issues or whatever. And those are signals that we need to pay attention to and find out, why am I going through this? That there's some physical thing going on here, and you've got to manage the physical, but there's an underlying cause of why you're in this state. And it's not just an instant thing. It takes time, because cumulatively over time, the longer we suppress stuff, the more we increase our vulnerability to disease. And be in an era today. I was just doing an interview earlier on, and we were just talking about the fact that I'd share this in my book too, that we are in an era currently where people, and this is crazy, Roxanne, people are dying 8 to 25 years younger than they should from preventable lifestyle diseases. Wow. And in this advance, we've never been so advanced medically or technologically or economically, etc., ever. Yet we, the trend of people living longer has been reversed. And they're referring to this as deaths of despair. People are not talking about it. The scientists aren't getting, the media doesn't want to pick this up, but it's very, very little is spoken about this, because they don't know what to do with it, because the current way of managing people's lifestyles is not very healthy. And what they've done is basically eliminate mind. You can't eliminate mind. You can't eliminate the humanity in us. You can't just make us a brain. We're not just a brain. We're not just a body. We're humans in life experiencing adverse circumstances, and no amount of using scripture as a band-aid and God as a genie is going to work. No amount of just doing a bit of meditation is going to work. You've got to actually process. You've got to be like Jesus. You've got to get in the garden. You've got to face the stuff. But then you'll rise again. And that's what I talk about. We really want to know what mind management and mental health is. We've got to go back to what Jesus demonstrates in the garden. And a lot of churches are not doing that. A lot of education environments, I think churches are some of the worst places where this is happening. And I say this from experience, because I teach all over, at education, neuroscience conferences, corporate, everywhere. But I'm seeing such in an environment where we're supposed to understand love, and we're supposed to understand how to process through pain. It's one of the environments where everything's just band-aids fight. Just stick a band-aid, just say a scripture instead of facing, if you feel, say you're depressed, that's bad. No, it's not bad. If you say you're depressed, you become aware, and that comes to awareness thing. As soon as you acknowledge depression, it's not that there's something wrong and evil with you. That's a gift from God. Depression is a signal. It's a gift. It's a messenger telling you, hey, pay attention. That depression is a warning signal that something's going on. Pay attention. Get in the garden. Go through the painful process of finding out why you are depressed, because it's not who you are. It's not an illness. You're not a broken brain. You're an amazing human being, made in love, made in God's image, made of this. You're amazing, but life's happened. So if you're depressed, that's a signal that life has happened to you. Something has happened, and that's a signal saying, okay, something's happened, you're not processing it. So you need to process through that, and it's going to be painful. If you've been suppressing an abuse for 20 years and you suddenly start becoming aware and see what happened to you, you can get more depressed. I mean, I had some of my patients, some of my subjects in my clinical trial, and I put some case studies in this book of patients that were subjects that were so depressed at the beginning of the study. They had tried everything. They literally saw themselves as depression. That was their identity. And within 21 days, instead of saying, I am depression, they were saying, I am depressed because of. And within 63 days, they were changing their behaviors. They were back at work. They were sleeping again. And there were no drugs involved. It was pure mind management. It was pure, okay, I'm feeling depressed. That's the warning signal. Why am I feeling this? This is the work I've got to do to understand, embrace, process, and reconceptualize, and understand that this is what's happened to me. So this is why their conversation shifts. And I found this in my practice. I found this with people. We reach millions now around the world, that when you understand that I am depressed because of, the language shifts. So instead of saying I am depression, my life's shot, to I am feeling depressed because of. And it's difficult and it's more depressing because now I see things that I didn't see. That so it got worse before it got better, which is normal. Jesus got beaten to pulp before Jesus got hung on the cross. So it got worse as the night progressed in the garden and as the days progressed. So we've got to understand that that's the normal process. Confronting our issues is a very painful, long, hard, difficult process that we need to do in community, which is why Jesus turned to the disciples and said, "Can you not be with me for about an hour?" No one can fix you. No one can go through what you're going through, but we need that support. So that's kind of what all my work is about, is to help you to understand how to drive the neuroplasticity of your brain with your mind to find those toxic issues and process through them in order to be able to manage and move forward in your life. And that's an ongoing process because we're always experiencing trauma. It's never going to end.
I've heard you speak on something that I think you referred to as, correct me if I'm wrong, but freaking out in the love zone.
Yes.
Right? Freaking out in the love zone.
Yeah.
And so that, I guess that looks like, I mean, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like, finding a safe person, somebody you could trust. Maybe that's a family member, a friend, a pastor, a hotline, God, but somebody that you can come clean to and share, because what we keep in secret keeps us bound, right? When we expose it to the light, like God can heal it. We can work on it. We can change it.
You're quite right. That's freaking out in the love zone. It is one of the terms that I use to refer to that. But if you look at what's happening in the sort of psychiatric world and the way that mental health is managed, if people do express those, say that they're depressed and anxious, they get labeled and diagnosed. And even though it may have a level of comfort to say, okay, now I know why I'm feeling like this, it's the wrong message, because it says that you're a broken brain, but you're not. It tells you that your brain caused it. So there's depression in there waiting to jump out at you. It's life circumstances, and we have to experience the joy and the grief. We have to realize they coexist, that this is part of being human, and that we need to be able to move between the two. And and to be able to process our stories. So there's so many stories that we can use from just people that have survived terrible situations. We have to talk about them. We have to express them. We have to tell our stories. We have to express the narrative. You can't just, have a feeling and then whack on a scripture like a Band-Aid. And unfortunately, in a lot of the churches, and I speak to this everywhere I go, there is this sort of thing that you mustn't express yourself, that you mustn't confess negative. It's not anything to do with confessing negative. It is everything to do with what Jesus did, where Jesus screamed out and said, "This is terrible.
Wow.
Take this from me." And that's the model. David's doing it. We are supposed to get it all out, own it, because once it's out, you start weakening. The neuroscience shows that the minute you're aware and you start getting it out and you start processing, which is the system that I've developed called the neurocycle, which tells you how to do this scientifically, that you use your mind, your messy mind, to get it to work with your wise mind. When you do that, you weaken these protein bonds and these chemicals, and this thing starts melting, and the energy is transferred, because the energy is never lost, to the healthy tree. And then this becomes the healthy proteins. And even though your pain is still there, but it's now changed. It's now this tiny little green part inside this big green healthy tree. It's converted. It's been reconceptualized. So it still happened to you, but now you've changed how it's playing out in you. But that requires work. That requires, it's not going to go away with a tablet. It's not going to go away with a quick fix, pass the buck prayer. It's going to go away with hard work and pain and being prepared to do the work. And that's where the cycles of 63 days comes in, and it's helpful, because you do the 5 steps over 63 days. This is what's going to happen, So that's the generic process, that system that will help you to manage whatever issue you're dealing with. And then you develop a system that then becomes habitual, so you can then apply it as a sustainable way of thinking during the course of the day. Because if we're supposed to bring every thought into captivity to love, that means that we're in our conscious waking moments, we're supposed to be constantly bringing every thought into captivity to God, to love. So how am I thinking? How am I feeling? How am I choosing? How am I reacting? How am I writing that email? What am I saying to my husband, my wife, my kids, my work colleagues? What am I thinking about this one? Is this right? Have I just snapped at someone? How am I going to correct that? Am I being driven by a trauma in my response now? We can do that every 10 seconds. According to the research, we are able to consciously and deliberately manage our minds every 10 seconds while we're awake. And that's what we're supposed to be doing, but we're not doing it. And that's what we need to be teaching people to do. And that's what I'm trying to teach people to do.
Well, I love it. And I'm so glad that you are. Okay, our time is coming close to the end. One more question. And I do want to talk about your new book too in just a moment. let's quickly talk about marriage and relationship. And so I did read in an article that you wrote, I believe it was 2019, you had said something like arguing, and I feel like this kind of ties in what we're talking about, but arguing can actually be beneficial to our health and to our relationship if done in the right way.
Yes,
So
I just did a podcast on that recently as well, and I've written so many articles on that. Basically, if you have an issue between in a relationship and you don't deal with it, you don't talk about it, it's there. It's toxic in both
same
of your
thing.
heads, and the narratives that you are building up around this is based on each of your assumptions. So therefore, this thing becomes a complete distortion of what the reality is. So you have to get it out, and
Right.
in getting it out, an argument can happen, but an argument can have rules where you can bring things into place where you don't have to scream and shout.
Right.
But it's very important that the other person is able to express how they feel.
Mm.
Each person is able to express how they feel, but in the framework of, okay, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I think you meant. And then you give the other person, so you tell the person how you felt, and you may be raising your voice, and it may create a bit of an argument, but just push through where you say, okay, look, I know this is upsetting you, but this is how I received your whatever you said. This is the assumptions I made. Are these assumptions? Have I seen this correctly? Is this what you meant? And then you give the other person a chance to say, no, you got me completely wrong. This is what I meant. And this is what I actually meant to say. That part was right, that part, whatever. In other words, so you expressed your emotion, which is really important to get up, that you get it out so that it can be fixed. And then that you give the other person a chance to say, by saying, did I make the wrong assumption? And you give the other person a chance to explain themselves. They're not defending, they're not justifying. You're giving the other person an opportunity to say, no, I'm sorry it came across that way. I actually meant this. And that way you can then work on a resolution. Say, okay, well, when this happens, this triggers this, and then you work towards, and there may be a little bit of juggling, arguing back and forth because your emotions are high. And that's where maybe you need a little bit of time out. You need to do maybe a little bit of deep breathing. The 10-second pause is a very, very powerful way of calming down. Where when you breathe in for 3 counts and out for 7, it calms down the neurochemical chaos in your brain that comes from being in a very highly emotional state. And if you repeat it 6 to 9 times, so for 60 to 90 seconds, you can calm down your neurochemistry and your neurophysiology to the point where you're a little bit more amenable to discussion. But if the discussion is going in the right direction, but it's getting heated, give yourself some time out. But then set a time, say, okay, it's not going to work now. We're both just too worked up. We've got quite far. Let's now put this on hold, and let's try and do it again in 2 hours time, or pick it up again in 2 hours time, or maybe in 24 hours or whatever. But don't just leave it hanging. Make sure that you resolve it, because an unresolved issue creates what we call a sort of sense of it creates a chronic environment, a chronic stressful environment. And in that chronic stressful environment, you've got this thing hanging over your head. And then it has this it creates a sort of nagging sensation in you, which is very damaging to the brain and the body. So just the mere fact that you are aiming to resolve it and you managing the mess is excellent. It shifts from 1,400 neurophysiological responses working against you to 1,400 neurophysiological responses working for you, just by the mere fact that you are agreeing to actually disagree and agreeing to move forward. And it's really okay to disagree. We've got to, that's what you asked me in the beginning, we need more tolerance. We need to recognize you don't have to agree with everything that your husband says. And no, he doesn't have to agree with you. That's totally okay. You can have differences of opinion, and we have to start honoring that in relationships, whether it's marriage relationships, whether it's just friendships, whatever. We need to honor those differences, and because difference is beautiful. There's no. That's not a bad thing to have different opinions.
Absolutely incredible. And yes, my husband is definitely a communicator. He always pushes me like, babe, let's talk about it. I'm a sweeper by nature. I feel like it's easier for me to kind of just like want to push it under the rug, but he always pushes me to talk about it. And every single time, whether it's a little bit of an argument, disagreement, conversation, I always feel better after, So
That's
I
so
love
good.
it. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay. Your book, which I believe the entire world needs. I know you're an author of many books. Honestly, Dr. Caroline Leaf, you're just such a beautiful, brilliant person.
Thank you. That's very kind.
Your newest book, Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess, 5 simple, scientifically proven steps to reduce anxiety, stress, and toxic thinking. I know you've already shared a little bit about that book, but tell us more.
Well, basically, this book is, as a scientist, you keep learning new things, and you keep changing, you keep growing. So what I've done over the years is I've continued to do clinical research and to improve what I developed 38 years ago. And this book is in this book is the results of my latest research, and the systems that I developed 38 years ago I have improved on and found what better ways of doing it and everything. So the book is about how to manage your mind. It's all about mind management. It's how to capture a thought and how to renew it, whether it is a big trauma, little trauma, acute trauma, complex trauma, toxic habit, something you want to build into your life, day-to-day stuff. It's how do you do that. So the second half of the book, I teach you about the concept of the neurocycle, which is the name I've given this 5-step process, which is a system for how you get your wise mind talking to your messy mind, and your wise mind obviously is connected to the Spirit of God. So you're accessing the wisdom of God, and that's the core of who we are. So it's been able to get your wise mind to talk to your messy mind, to capture those thoughts and to manage them. Because in the messiness of our messy minds, we can then, when they manage, we can then repair and we can grow. So it's very practical, the second half, what the neurocycle is, how to do it, what's happening in your brain, mind, and body as you do it, with lots of examples of how to apply it. In the first half of the book, I explain what mind is and what thoughts are and what memories are and what's going wrong with the current mental health system, why people are dying younger. And I also put some of the results of my clinical research, that just to give you the science, that this is not just something that I have read in a psychology textbook or learned as theories over the years. This is stuff that's hardcore scientific factual research that I've done for years and years and years, based on very, very strong theories of scientific research with scientific principles, that this is real, that when you do this, your brain and mind, as you're listening to me now, your mind, it's working at 400 billion actions per second to convert what I'm saying into thought trees in your brain, and you can control that process. So the evidence is there, and the evidence is there that in our bodies we're going to have it. If we don't manage our minds over time, these create a toxic impact. So it will affect our physical health cumulatively over time. Wow. So for example, right down to the level of your DNA. This is so powerful. And I'll finish with this. Every second we're making millions of new cells. Every second. But the quality of those new cells, which actually then form all of our organs and all our systems, and therefore our ability to function in a healthy way, the health of those cells is determined by our DNA. And our DNA if you take the DNA that is made of chromosomes look like a little X. I'm crossing my fingers, and if you imagine my fingernails are the ends of the chromosomes, and they're called telomeres. And a telomere influences how healthily the cell will grow. So we're making a million new cells. So if we have healthy telomeres, we make healthy cells. Unhealthy telomeres, unhealthy cells, unhealthy bodies, unhealthy brains, unhealthy. And that then feeds back into our mind, and it sets up a negative feedback loop. So I've shown from my research that, and there's also other people in this field that have shown that our telomeres, the health of the telomeres is dependent on the health of our mind. So when you're dead, nothing does anything, everything disintegrates. The difference between a dead person and an alive person is your mind, as I've already said. So if your mind is being managed, your telomeres are healthy, your cells are healthy, so your physical and mental health are moving in the right direction. And so that's a big part. That's some of the things I showed in my research. So there's evidence for you that if you manage your mind and change your mind to change your brain, you change your body, you impact your physical and mental health. And that's the power we have in our hands.
Just wow. Once again, it is such good news. I mean, God just created us in such an incredible way. Dr. Caroline Leaf, thank you so much for taking time out of your crazy busy schedule to have this conversation today. It's been an honor. All right, guys, that's all the time that we have with Dr. Caroline Leaf. I know that this episode blessed you as much as it blessed me. Guys, we have great guests every single week. So if you haven't already, like and subscribe to our channel. Also, check out our social profiles at Dream Label Group. Check out our website, dreamlabelgroup.com. There you'll find a mailing list. And if you join that mailing list, you will be some of the first to hear brand new music from Dream and receive updates about our awesome show. Also, guys, I just want to take time to thank everybody for watching or listening over podcast. For those of you that don't know, we are pretty much everywhere. You can find us at iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pandora, Spotify, and so many more. Go check it out. Okay, until next week, stay blessed in Him, and we'll see you then. Hey guys, Roxanne Grace here. Thank you guys so much for watching Dream's YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single conversation or new music from Dream. And if you guys enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit the like and notification buttons and share this video with a friend who needs to hear it. Oh, and don't forget, you can subscribe and listen to the conversation anywhere podcasts are available. Thanks for watching.